Story 1. The Shovel in the Night. I never expected something like this to happen, especially not in my quiet suburban neighborhood. The days are usually uneventful, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and the biggest drama is an argument over whose turn it is to mow the lawn. But that all changed when my neighbor, Richard, came to me with a request that would alter my view of him forever. It started 5 years ago, when Richard's son, Nathan, disappeared. Richard had come to me and the rest of the neighbors distraught as he reported his son missing. The search was intense, the news spread quickly, but eventually it all slowed down. Despite their efforts, Nathan was never found. Over time, Richard and his wife, Diane, withdrew into their grief. Their smiles faded, and their once friendly presence became more distant. They stopped hosting their usual barbecues and gatherings, and we rarely saw them outside their house. One evening, as I was taking out the trash, Richard approached me unexpectedly. His face looked different, pale, tired, and with a strange urgency in his eyes. He asked if I could lend him a shovel. Without thinking much about it, I said yes, grabbed the shovel, and handed it to him. He mentioned he needed it for some work in his backyard and promised to return it the following day. The next day, curiosity gnawed at me. I had noticed Richard in his backyard for the past few hours, digging away at something. I could see the shovel sticking out of the ground, but there was a nagging feeling in my gut that made me uneasy. It wasn't like him to be so secretive, and his behavior seemed off. I decided to check on him, so I grabbed my second shovel and headed over. I called his name, but when he looked up and saw me approaching, his face turned pale. He rushed over to me, almost frantic. No, don't come here," he said, waving his hands in a dismissive motion. His reaction was so strange that I felt a chill run down my spine. "Richard, what's going on? Why won't you let me help?" I asked, confused and a little alarmed. He pointed to the gate like I was some sort of dog and said sternly, "Just leave. I don't want anyone near my yard." I didn't understand why he was acting like this, but his behavior only seemed more and more erratic. Reluctantly, I turned and went back inside my house, my mind racing. From the window, I continued to watch as Richard worked for another half hour, pausing occasionally to look around nervously. I thought he might be hiding something. As night fell, I heard the unmistakable sound of a shovel hitting the dirt again, but this time it was much later, around 1:30 a.m. I felt compelled to know what he was up to. Quietly, I snuck outside and peeked over the fence, hoping to catch a glimpse of what he was doing. Under the pale moonlight, I could see Richard digging furiously, sweat dripping down his face. When he finally went inside his house to take a break, I seized the opportunity and snuck into his yard. My heart raced as I crouched down next to the hole. At the bottom, a black garbage bag was partially exposed. I hesitated, wondering if I should look inside. My stomach twisted, and I stood frozen for a moment, torn between fear and curiosity. Before I could make a decision, I heard the back door open, and Richard emerged. He was looking around cautiously, and for a second, our eyes met through the darkness. He saw me, and in that moment, his expression twisted into something unrecognizable, almost like a desperate, frightened animal. I panicked, darting back into my own backyard just in time to avoid being caught. The next morning, I looked out the window to see that the hole was filled in. Richard's SUV was parked on the street instead of the driveway, which only added to the strangeness of it all. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, but I didn't know what to do. What had he buried there? And why had he gone to such lengths to hide it? Days passed, and Richard avoided me completely. He never returned my shovel, and I never dared to ask for it back. But then something unsettling happened. One day, I looked out my window and saw Richard standing at his own window, staring directly into my house. His blinds were cracked just enough for me to see his gaze. When he realized I had noticed him, he quickly shut them. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. I couldn't ignore the suspicion that something dark was lurking behind Richard's actions. I made the decision to call the police. My heart pounded in my chest as I dialed the number, explaining everything I had seen. The police arrived within minutes, and I led them to the backyard. When they dug up the spot Richard had been working on, their expressions turned grim as they uncovered the black bag. The contents were horrifying. It was the remains of a child, Nathan. I was in shock, my mind reeling. Richard, the man I had known for so many years, had buried his son in his own backyard. When the police questioned him, Richard claimed it was an accident. He insisted that Nathan had fallen down the stairs one evening, and in his grief, he had hidden the body in an attempt to protect his family from the shame. But I didn't believe him. How could I? No father would act the way Richard did unless there was something far darker at play. As the police took Richard away, I stood in the yard, my heart heavy with disbelief. The truth had come to light, but it felt like the world had shattered around me. The man I had called a friend had hidden a secret too horrific to comprehend.
Story 2. The Boy Next Door. I don't remember exactly when my life started feeling wrong, but I know it all began the summer I turned 15. We had just moved into a new house in a quiet neighborhood, a place far removed from the city, with wide streets and neatly trimmed lawns. My family had always kept to ourselves, and this house was no different. My parents were busy with work, and I was just adjusting to life in a new school. It wasn't until the boy next door started showing up that things began to take a strange turn. His name was Marcus, and I never really saw him much at first. He was one of those kids who kept to himself, always inside his house. But when we moved in, Marcus seemed oddly interested in our family. One evening, while I was outside, shooting hoops in the driveway, I saw him standing at the end of my yard, watching me. "I noticed you're alone a lot," Marcus continued, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Your parents don't seem to be around much, do they?" It wasn't an odd question, but it felt personal. I just shrugged, trying to brush it off. That was the first time we spoke. After that, I began to see him more often. At first, it was just casual hellos when we saw each other around the yard, but then Marcus started showing up at the door. He'd knock or ring the bell, inviting me to come over and play video games or hang out in his room. I didn't think much of it. Everyone had their own way of making new friends, right? One weekend, he invited me to join him in the woods at the edge of the neighborhood. He said he and his cousin, Alex, used to play there all the time, man, that it was a great place to hang out and explore. I wasn't entirely convinced. The woods had always seemed a little creepy, but there was something in Marcus's tone, something persuasive, that made me agree. We set out that afternoon, walking along the trail that led deeper into the trees. Marcus didn't talk much as we walked, which made the trip feel a little uncomfortable. I tried to make small talk, but he was distant, his eyes always darting around as if he was looking for something. When we finally reached the clearing near the river, I realized we weren't alone. There was a large duffel bag sitting by a nearby tree. It looked out of place, especially since Marcus hadn't mentioned bringing anything with him. "Come on," Marcus said, walking over and opening the bag. "I brought something for us to do." I didn't expect what I saw. Inside the bag were 2 guns, real guns. Not BB guns or airsoft guns like I thought, but actual handguns. My heart raced, and I took a step back. "Wait, what the hell is this?" I asked, trying to hide the panic in my voice. Marcus turned, his expression shifting into something unreadable. "Don't freak out, man. We're just gonna mess around with them. You know, target practice." I felt my stomach turn. Something about the way he said it made me uneasy. "I don't think we should," I said, suddenly wanting to leave. "This is dangerous," but Marcus wasn't listening. He grabbed one of the guns and pointed it toward a tree, firing off a shot that echoed in the woods. The sound rang in my ears, and I took a step back, horrified. "Come on, just try it," Marcus said, holding the gun out to me. I shook my head. No, I'm done. We're leaving, but Marcus didn't want to leave. He kept insisting, even pulling the gun back from me and raising it toward the trees again. When I tried to walk away, he got angry, his eyes darkening. Are you scared? He sneered. You're just gonna walk away. I froze, not knowing what to say. I was scared. Scared of him, scared of what he was capable of. He had the kind of look in his eyes that made you wonder what else he might do. But before I could react, he laughed and lowered the gun. All right, he said. We'll head back. But next time, you better be ready. That was the last time I spent any time with Marcus. Over the next few days, I started noticing things. Little things. Like how he would just appear on the other side of the street, watching my house. Or how he would stand by his window, staring directly into mine. It was as if he was keeping tabs on me, making sure I wasn't going to tell anyone about what had happened. One night, around midnight, I woke up to the sound of something tapping lightly against my window. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and saw Marcus standing outside, just barely visible in the dark. I thought I might be imagining things, but then I saw him smile, that creepy, knowing smile. I wasn't sure what was happening, but it felt like something was closing in on me. I wanted to leave, to get away from the house, from Marcus, from everything. But we were stuck there for a while longer. The final straw came just a few days before we were supposed to move out of the house. I woke up in the middle of the night, sensing something wrong. There, standing in my bedroom doorway, was Marcus. This time, he wasn't smiling, he was holding a gun, the barrel aimed directly at me. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, as he said, "Don't you dare tell anyone what happened. If you do, I'll come back, I'll make sure you regret it." I stared at him, my heart racing. I didn't scream, I didn't move. I just nodded, my voice trembling as I whispered, "I won't." He didn't say another word, he just backed away, disappearing into the dark night. And I knew, somehow, I'd narrowly escaped something worse than I could even imagine. I never spoke to him again. I never told anyone about the guns or the threats. I didn't want anyone to think I was crazy. By the time my parents decided to move out, I didn't question their decision. They never gave me a clear reason for leaving, and I didn't ask. I was just relieved to be getting away from that place. As we packed up, I noticed something strange. Marcus seemed to be watching me more than ever, his eyes always lurking from behind windows or across the street. No matter where I went, no matter how far I tried to distance myself, he was there observing, waiting. It wasn't just a casual glance, it was like he knew exactly when I was looking, and he'd make sure I saw him. It freaked me out. Every time I stepped outside, there he was, standing just far enough away to be hidden by the shadows. It was unnerving, this constant sense of being watched, and I couldn't shake the fear that he was waiting for the right moment to come closer. On the day he finally left, I didn't feel a sense of relief as I should have. Instead, I felt a lingering dread, a sinking feeling that I couldn't quite explain. As our car pulled away from the house, I glanced back one last time, only to see Marcus standing on his front porch, his eyes locked on me. Even from a distance, I could see the faintest trace of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips, and then we were gone.